Guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. In this video, we'll be adding and subtracting with negative fractions. So by the end, we should all know the rules of adding and subtracting with negative numbers. And our ultimate goal is to be able to add positive and negative fractions and also subtract positive and negative fractions. Alright, so a real key thing to know for this lesson is that the techniques for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing positive fractions also applies to negative fractions. So we'll go through the arithmetic rules first. These are exactly the same as the rules we used in our last topic of integers, but we'll just quickly recap on this. Alright, so our first one, subtracting a larger positive fraction from a smaller positive fraction will result in a negative fraction. So I've got an example right below that. We have one fraction here and a larger positive fraction here. So that's a smaller positive and that's a larger positive. When you subtract the larger positive from a smaller positive, you get a negative result, as you can see in that one here. Alright, so our next rule says adding a negative fraction is equivalent to subtracting its opposite. So we have half plus negative a third here. So we've got our negative fraction on the right, and we're adding that negative fraction to this fraction here. So it says it is equivalent to subtracting its opposite. The opposite of a negative is a positive, so I've got the opposite right below. Opposite to negative a third is positive a third, and this time we're subtracting its opposite, so that becomes half minus positive a third. In the end, it just means half minus 1/3. So whenever you have a case of adding a negative or subtracting a positive, it will just become a subtraction question. So if you just have one of each here like that, in the end, it just becomes a subtraction. Alright, and the last rule we need to know for adding and subtracting negative numbers or fractions is that subtracting a negative fraction is equivalent to adding its opposite. So I have an example once again right below where it's subtracting a negative number. So remember, when we have two negatives right next to each other, it just becomes a positive. So in the end, half minus negative a third becomes half plus a third. Alright, now let's go through a couple of sample questions just so we can really get our head around this. Alright, so the first question is 2/7 plus negative 5/7. So let's refer back to our rules that we have right above. So this one is referring to the second one. Adding a negative fraction is equivalent to subtracting its opposite. So that means 2/7 plus negative 5/7 is the same as subtracting its opposite. So it's exactly the same thing here. And remember, that just becomes 2/7 minus 5/7. And if we take away 2 from 5, that becomes negative 3/7. So that will be our answer. Alright, this one here, 2/3 minus negative 4/3. So this one refers to our third rule here. Subtracting a negative fraction is equivalent to adding its opposite. So we have two negatives next to each other, one subtraction here and the negative number, so that means that just becomes a positive. So 2/3 plus 4/3, that is what our question now is. So that 4 plus 2 is 6, and our denominator stays the same. And let's convert that to a mixed number or a proper fraction. 3 goes into 6 twice and there's no remainder, so our final answer is just 2. Alright, I have a couple of very similar questions right here now. Have a go at working on those on your own and just unpause the video when you're ready to go through them with me. Alright, so the first question says 5/11 plus negative 8/11. So once again, this is just referring to our second rule here. Adding a negative fraction is equivalent to subtracting its opposite. So let's have a go at that. 5/11 plus negative 8/11 is the same as subtracting its opposite. So that just becomes minus 8/11. 5 minus 8 gives us negative 3. And our denominator stays the same, so that will be our final answer. And the next question here, remember, two negatives next to each other side by side becomes one positive. So 4/5 plus 3/5 is what we would end up with. So 4 plus 3 is 7, and our denominator stays the same. And whenever you get an improper fraction, we always make it a proper or simplify it, unless the question states otherwise. And this one doesn't tell us to keep it as an improper, so we will make it a proper fraction. So 5 goes into 7 once, and we have a remainder of 2, and so that will be our final answer. Alright, so I've got a couple more sample questions to go through with you before you guys start working through them on your own. So this top left one says 1 over 5 plus negative 1/4. So this one's similar to the one before. It's referring to our second rule, but our denominators are different. So let's rewrite this first. 1 over 5. So adding a negative is the same as subtracting its opposite. So 1 over 5 minus 1 over 4 is what we'll end up with. And the first thing we need to do here, after we've made it simpler from that, is we need to make the denominators exactly the same. And this is done by finding the lowest common denominator. In this case, we'll just multiply them by each other. So remember, whatever we do to the denominator, we also need to do to the numerator. So multiply the left side by 4 and the right side by 5. We end up with 4 over 20 minus 5 over 20. Alright, so 4 minus 5, that brings us to negative 1 over 20. And I can't see this being simplified any further, and it is a proper fraction, so that is where our answer ends. Alright, and this next question, let's start by making it look a bit nicer. We have two negatives directly next to each other, so that means it just becomes an addition question. So let's rewrite that. Negative 7 over 3, that becomes plus 3 and 2/3. Our denominators are the same, but the first thing I will do is convert this one to an improper fraction. So let's do that. Rewrite the first part. That's fine, just the way it is. Converting that to an improper fraction, hopefully you guys all still remember. We multiply that big number by the denominator, that becomes 9, and then add the numerator, that becomes 11 over 3. So negative 7 plus 11, that gives us a final answer of 4 over 3. And remember, always convert to a proper fraction. 3 goes into 4 once with a remainder of 1. So that is our final answer for this case. Alright, just pause the video for these two questions and have a go at yourselves, and then we'll go through them together when you're ready. Alright, so let's have a go at these two. 2 over 3 plus negative 4 over 5. Let's just rewrite that to make it look nice. So that just becomes 2 over 3 minus 4 over 5. Once again, referring to that second rule. So we need to find the lowest common denominator. In this case, once again, I'll just multiply them by each other. Whatever you do to the denominator, you also have to do to the numerator. So that becomes 10 over 15 minus 12 over 15. And 10 minus 2, thinking about our number line, that becomes negative 2, and our denominator just stays the same. And that will be our final answer, as we can't simplify any further. Alright, give yourself a tick if you got that correct, and we'll go through that last one now. So we have negative 4 over 5 minus negative 2 and 1 over 5. So let's rewrite that once again just to make it look a bit nicer. We have two negatives right next to each other here. So that will just become a positive, and we'll be adding them together now. 2 and 1 over 5. Our next step, denominators are the same. I'll just convert that to an improper fraction once again. And that gives us 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Negative 4 plus 11, that should give us 7 over 5. And our final answer will be 1 and 2 over 5. Give yourself a tick if you got that correct as well. Alright, that brings us to the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and hopefully by now you guys all know the rules of adding and subtracting with negative numbers. You guys can add positive and negative fractions, and you guys are also able to subtract positive and negative fractions. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys all back in the next video.
Boom! 2 plus 2 is 4, minus 1, that's 3, quick maths.